December of 1944. France was enduring its harshest winter in 40 years. Soldiers of the 35th Infantry Division spent their nights inside foxholes, not in barracks, not in farmhouses, in shallow positions dug into frozen ground. After dark, temperatures fell below zero. Winter clothing was scarce. The supply network had failed to keep pace with the advance, and the equipment that did arrive could not meet demand. Some soldiers stuffed newspapers around their feet. Frostbite cases increased. Others succumbed to the cold before ever facing German fire. 3 miles behind the front line stood a chateau in the village of Saarburg. It contained 12 rooms, operational fireplaces, a wine cellar, and a kitchen serving hot meals twice each day since the division entered the area. On November 28th, Brigadier General Harold Cobb had taken possession of the building as his personal headquarters. He occupied a bedroom on the second floor. 6 staff members worked around him. A driver remained available and kept his vehicle warm. Meanwhile, his troops remained in foxholes. A supply sergeant named Willis raised the issue with his company commander. The company commander passed the concern to the battalion commander. The battalion commander considered the chain of command above him and chose not to act. The sergeant decided on another course. He wrote a letter and sent it to the Third Army Inspector General. On December 14th, the letter reached Patton. He was eating breakfast when he read it. Patton set down his coffee and turned to his aide. "Get me Cobb," he said, "and a jeep." Patton traveled personally. There was no convoy, no formal inspection party. Only one jeep, a driver and his aide seated behind him. He sent no warning message ahead. He gave Cobb no opportunity to prepare, rearrange appearances, or organize an explanation. The journey from 3rd Army forward headquarters to Saarburg covered 3 miles and took 20 minutes over roads coated with ice. Those same roads were slowing supply convoys. Those same roads had carried the soldiers now sleeping in frozen foxholes. Everything matched the description in the sergeant's letter. The chateau stood behind stone walls and an iron gate. Smoke drifted upward from 2 chimneys. A staff car waited outside. Its driver sat inside with the engine running to stay warm. A sentry at the entrance snapped to attention the moment he recognized the 4-star general. Patton did not pause. He entered through the front door without knocking. General Cobb was having breakfast. Eggs, toast, a steaming coffee pot. He rose immediately. His expression changed several times in rapid succession as he realized who had entered his dining room at 7:30 a.m. without any advance notice. Patton examined the breakfast table. Then he looked at Cobb. His gaze moved slowly around the room. A fire burned behind the general. Curtains covered the windows. The room carried the unmistakable warmth of a place heated throughout the night. For several moments, Patton said nothing. Then he asked a single question. "When was the last time you slept in the field with your men?" Cobb answered that his duties as a commander required a headquarters capable of maintaining communications and coordinating staff operations. Patton continued staring at him. "Your men are sleeping in foxholes," he said. "They are wrapping newspaper around their feet because they do not have winter boots. 3 soldiers have lost toes to frostbite this week alone, and you are sitting here eating eggs." Cobb began defending the arrangement. He spoke about the operational demands of a brigade headquarters. He described communication requirements necessary for a general officer. He explained staffing needs for an organization responsible for thousands of soldiers across a complicated sector. He argued that effective command depended on a stable environment where decisions could be made without disruption and with sufficient resources available. Patton listened to every word. He never interrupted. He remained where he stood and waited until Cobb had finished everything he intended to say. When the room finally fell silent, Patton spoke. "You have 48 hours, he said. "You will move your headquarters into the field. You will sleep where your men sleep. You will eat what your men eat. And you will personally account for every soldier in your command who has suffered cold weather injuries since November 28th, the day you moved into this building." Cobb asked whether that was a direct order. "Put that in writing," Cobb asked. "Do it," Patton replied, "because I intend to verify it myself." He left through the same entrance he had used moments earlier. Then he climbed back into the jeep and returned to headquarters. That freezing morning he skipped breakfast. His aide recorded the fact in the logbook without adding any remarks. The next actions Patton took followed a precise plan. He directed the 3rd Army Inspector General to begin an official examination of winter readiness throughout the entire sector. The review was not limited to Cobb's brigade. It covered every division, every command level, every formation operating in severe winter conditions while lacking sufficient equipment. Patton wanted exact figures. How many soldiers had suffered frostbite? How many cases of trench foot had occurred? How many men had been removed from duty because of cold-related injuries since the advance had slowed in November? Which units possessed proper winter gear? Which units were still waiting? At what stage had supplies stopped moving through the system? Who knew about those breakdowns? And who had chosen to document the problem instead of forcing it upward through the chain of command? Reports arrived during the following 3 days. The results were worse than Patton had anticipated. Across the sector, hundreds of soldiers had sustained cold weather injuries ranging from minor to severe. Some had lost fingers or toes. Others had been evacuated and would not rejoin their units before winter ended. The investigation revealed failures at multiple points within the supply network. Those failures had been noted by senior officers. They appeared in reports written with cautious, neutral wording that acknowledged difficulties without creating pressure for immediate action. Patton viewed the supply system as a serious issue. He intended to address it separately and in an organized manner. But his immediate concern was different. He focused on commanders. These were the officers responsible for understanding exactly what their troops faced and ensuring that higher headquarters could not ignore those conditions. Patton issued a directive to every general officer serving under Third Army. The order contained 2 paragraphs. The first addressed the unacceptable number of cold weather casualties throughout the sector. It reached a clear conclusion. The problem was not solely logistical. It was also a leadership failure. Senior commanders had known their soldiers lacked adequate winter equipment. They had documented the shortage. They had not treated it as an emergency. They had not forced the next level of command to confront the issue. Patton wrote that this absence of urgency represented a failure of command and would be handled accordingly. The second paragraph delivered one instruction. Every general officer would spend at least 1 night each week in the field alongside the troops. There would be no exceptions, no headquarters exemptions. 1 night every week under the same conditions their soldiers were enduring. If it is too cold for a general, Patton wrote, it is too cold for a private, and if it is acceptable for a private, it is acceptable for a general. He continued, I expect every officer of general rank under my command to know through direct personal experience exactly what their men are enduring, not from reports, not from briefings, from sleeping in it. Any officer who failed to comply would be removed from command. General Cobb relocated his headquarters on December 16th. The move occurred 47 hours after Patton's visit. The new headquarters occupied a requisitioned farmhouse located half a mile behind the forward line. It was cold. Only 1 fireplace served the main room. It could not keep the building as warm as the chateau had been. The kitchen now provided 1 hot meal each day instead of 2. There was no wine cellar. No staff car sat outside with its engine running in the morning. The relocation happened quietly. There was no ceremony, no announcement. Equipment was loaded onto vehicles. Communications were established again at the new site. The chateau was returned to its French owners, who had been confined to the outbuildings since late November when the requisition began. The soldiers noticed, not because anyone informed them, not because Cobb gathered the men and explained what had happened, not because he offered reasons why smoke no longer rose from the chateau chimneys. The soldiers noticed, not because anyone made an announcement, not because official orders were posted. They noticed because the staff car was no longer parked in the village square. They noticed because news traveled the way it always does inside a combat unit, passed from man to man without ever appearing on paper. By the evening of December 16th, most soldiers occupying foxholes within 3 kilometers of the village had a fairly accurate understanding of what had taken place. One of those soldiers wrote a letter home 3 days later. His family preserved it. Years afterward, the letter appeared in a regimental history covering the campaign. In it, he wrote, "They say Patton came here himself and put the general out of his house." I do not know whether that is exactly what happened. What I do know is that Cobb came to the forward positions yesterday. He gave no speech. He said nothing at all. He walked along the line and examined the positions. He remained for 2 hours. He looked cold. He continued, "It was the first time I thought maybe he understood what we were dealing with out here." The supply sergeant who had sent the original letter was never officially identified as the source of the complaint that reached Patton. The Inspector General's investigation never mentioned his name. Patton's visit to Cobb contained no direct reference to the letter. After the campaign ended, Willis returned with his unit and received his discharge during the summer of 1945. Years later, he told the story once to a military historian, gathering accounts from enlisted soldiers who had served under Third Army during the winter campaign. Willis said he never believed the letter would accomplish anything. He wrote it because he felt compelled to act, and because the chain of command had already shown no intention of moving on its own. He sent the letter to the Inspector General because it was the only contact he could locate outside the command structure he had already approached. In the days that followed, he assumed nothing would come of it. He was a supply sergeant. He had mailed a letter to a general he had never met regarding a situation located 3 miles from a heated headquarters building. The war was vast. His letter was small, and the chain of command had already demonstrated that it would not act by itself. Like everyone else in the sector, he learned what happened through rumors. Patton had personally driven to Saarburg. Cobb had been ordered to leave within 48 hours. Willis never knew whether his letter directly caused those events or whether Patton had already been aware of the situation and simply received confirmation. He said it made no difference to him. What mattered was that someone had gone. Cobb was not removed from command after Patton's visit. He remained in his position through the remainder of the winter campaign and continued into the spring offensive. His service record reflected the Inspector General's review and the corrective measures implemented in December of 1944. The winter spanning 1944 into 1945 remained unforgiving from beginning to end. The shortages that left soldiers without proper cold weather gear were not solved by a single order or by one visit to one chateau. Cold injuries continued throughout December and into January. The Battle of the Bulge stretched supplies, transportation networks, and resources across the entire Allied front. The challenge was immense. The responses were imperfect. Progress came slowly and never fully matched the demands imposed by that winter. Yet after December 16th, something in the sector had changed. The generals were now spending at least one night each week in the field. The soldiers in the foxholes knew it. Whether that knowledge made the freezing conditions easier to endure is something only those men could answer. What changed was less visible than temperature, but it was no less real. Patton's aide recorded one final detail from the morning of December 14th. After saying, "Get me Cobb in a jeep," Patton remained seated for a brief moment. He looked at the breakfast still waiting before him. Hot food, a warm room, the kind of morning that existed behind the lines while entirely different mornings existed ahead of them. Then he pushed the meal aside and stood. "Let's go right now," he said. He did not eat again until that evening. If you enjoyed this story and want more military history, leadership stories, and lesser-known moments from wartime history, be sure to follow, like, and share for future episodes. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.